Hey crafty friends, this is Chelsea. Welcome to today's video. We are going to be using these adorable little hedgehogs. They are the April stamp of the month from Close to My Heart. They are our final stamp of the month, and what a perfect set for that. I love how cute these guys are, and they're going to be so much fun to color up. And I'm going to figure out some ways to help make your cards pop. Now, I have the Journey special. This is also the April special from Close to My Heart. We got these beautiful foiled papers. We have the beautiful UV resist coating. It's just like a clear coat that is shiny and gives you really nice subtle details, as well as the Journey just regular cardstock. Journey is the color of the year, and I think probably my favorite color of the year. I'm making 3 cards in today's video, and I'm going to be coloring them pretty much the same. So I'm just going to color one for you. I'm going to use my Copic markers. I have my colorless blender, and then I have some yellows here, Y11, Y15, Y17, and Y35. Now, I'm not too sure between the 17 and the 35 if I'm going to use both of them or just one of them. They're fairly close. The 17 is actually just a little bit darker. And then I have E21, E25, E27, and E29, and then R20 just for a little bit of pink in the ears. Of course, feel free to use whatever coloring medium you like. I am using one TriBlend marker, the dull green. It is my favorite kind of green combination for leaves, so I'm going to be using that one as well. I've stamped my little guy with intense black ink. I've let it dry, and it's stamped on Copic Express It paper. Now I'm starting off with the ears, just a little bit of pink at the base, and then blending that out with the colorless blender. If you guys don't want to watch the coloring process, you can skip ahead to actually assembling the cards, but I thought this was worth showing you in case you have these images and you want some ideas on how to color them. I have colored them a couple of different ways. So I'm going in with my E21, and that is my lightest brown color. I'm just laying down a little bit on his face. I left some white towards the outside. I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave a little bit of white there because a lot of hedgehogs actually have some white there. When I'm coloring animals, lots of times I will go ahead and look them up, or even different flowers, I'll go ahead and look them up and kind of get an idea of how to color them. So I grabbed the E25 to add the shading, and now I'm going back with the E21 to kind of blend those together. I decided I wanted his color right there to be fairly smooth. Now I'm taking the colorless blender and just blending out the edges of that lighter brown. And now I'm going to go into doing his body. Same thing, I'm going to lay down some light first. I don't always do this. Sometimes I just go in with my shading color, my darker color, and then with my light. But I wanted my blending to be fairly smooth. So I went in with that lighter color first. And now I'm going in with the E25 and adding some shading under his head, like where his neck would be, and around his little front leg there, and around the edges of his tummy. I think the good thing to keep in mind is you can always add more dark, and I am going to add more dark, but I'm just going slowly at first. So I went in with the lighter E color again, the E21, and just blending that out. It's always easier to add a little bit of color at first and build up the color rather than adding too much and then regretting it, because it's very hard to take it away, but it's definitely a lot easier to add it. Next, I went up to do his ears, just a little bit of the E25 at the base and then the E21 around the tops of his ears to leave a little bit of a highlight up there. And then once I was done this, I decided that his tummy needed some more color, because usually I like to blend with 3 colors. I find either 3 or 4, depending on how large the area is a really good number. And I don't have a color in between the E21 and the E25, and I don't have anything else in my collection that was really working between those 2 colors. I definitely still have some holes in my collection, so I need to fix that. Hopefully over the next year I can pick up a few more markers to fill in those gaps. So you can see I add a little bit more on his tummy, and now I'm going into his little like quill area. I'm not sure exactly what that's called, but I have the E29, which is the deepest brown, and I'm trying to very carefully color in like the base part of where his little quills would be and leave the tips white. So I saw a lot of little pictures of hedgehogs that had like these kind of bright white tips on their quills, and so that's what I was going for. I'm trying to make it darker all around the base at the part that would kind of be like next to his skin, and then I'll add a little bit lighter color next to that, but the majority of this part of the coloring is going to be this E29. I really took my time going around here, and this is where I love having the brush tip of the Copic markers, because you can really get in between all those little areas and still leave those delicate little quills white, which is, it takes time, it takes patience. I definitely had to slow down and go carefully. Like I mentioned, these images are from the April stamp of the month. You can still get it through the end of April, except the thin cuts, the dies, are no longer available for this set. This is actually going to be my last video as a Close to My Heart maker. It is super bittersweet. Starting May 1st, I'm going to have a Stampin' Up! Website, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, but I have some fun new products to play with. I have some really great ideas, and I'm excited, but I'm also sad to see Close to My Heart go. It has been 15 years for me, and lots of memories, lots of wonderful things, lots of travel, and lots of really good friendships made. So we will see what the next part of the journey holds. I'm excited to get going on this next chapter. I did grab the E25, and I'm just going in to add a little bit of lightness, kind of going up the quills. I want to leave just the ends of them white. I'm trying to use a very light hand with this, and you could skip this step if you want to. You could stick with just the darker shade and then leave the rest of it white, and I think it would look totally fine. I'm going to go on and color the flower now, so I'm taking the E25 and just coloring in the middle, and then E29 and adding just little dots, starting at the base and working my way up. I want to put the dots closer together at the bottom so it appears darker, and then have fewer dots towards the top. This is just a really great way to create some texture with some simple dot coloring. For the flower, I'm going to switch up the order of my coloring a little bit. I'm starting with Y35. Now, yellows are super easy to blend. Like if you're starting out with alcohol markers, start with yellows. They're so easy, and they kind of just seamlessly blend together. Sometimes too much. Sometimes it's hard to get enough contrast between the yellow shades. So I started with the Y35 just at the base where I wanted it darker. And now I'm blending out with the Y15, trying to leave the tips lighter and just enough to kind of blend like halfway or so. I probably went a little farther than that. And then I'm going to grab the Y11 and coloring almost to the very ends. While I was doing it on some of the petals, I did decide to leave the very ends white. Not a very big area of white. If I wanted them to be a bit brighter, I could do that. But I decided to go in with Y17 because it is a tad darker than the Y35, and I just wanted to deepen up the shadows a little bit and try and create a little bit more contrast. I could have grabbed an even more orangey yellow and made that even darker. Now I'm using the dull green TriBlend marker. I'm going in with the dark shade. I love how these markers have 3 shades in one. It makes coloring so easy, and if you're a beginner, I totally recommend them. So I went dark first, then medium, now light, and it's such a quick way to color in. Now I'm adding just some black pen around his little eyes and his little nose to deepen it up, and then I grabbed a white gel pen and just put a little highlight on his nose. I think he turned out super cute. I love how he's looking. Now I'm going to go ahead and just cut him out with the coordinating die. If you don't have a die, you could have stamped him on a circle or some other shape like that. Now this next step is optional, and it's a little bit tedious, but I think it's totally worth it for the finished card. I'm going in with the TriBlend marker, the blue turquoise shades, in the darkest shade. And actually, I did end up off camera adding a second layer because I wanted it really dark. So here's what it looks like with a second layer. I wanted it to match the journey paper. I didn't want the white border around it. I want it to coordinate, and actually this color is a perfect match for journey. Now, once I did that, I did end up coloring over some of his little quills. So I'm going back in with a white gel pen and just re-adding some of the white in. And I think it makes a big difference because it just brightens him up and really finishes him off. So even if you had trouble coloring him in, I think you could just go in with a white gel pen afterwards and re-brighten up those quills, and it would have just as good of effect. And there he is, all finished. I think he's absolutely adorable. I did color the other hedgehogs I'm using off camera, but I wanted to at least show you once what I did. So I have a 4¼ by 5½ inch white card base. I put some of that gold foil Journey specialty cardstock on there, and then I cut another piece of Journey cardstock at 3½ by 4¾ and I used a 2½ inch circle die to cut a circle window in it. And then I wanted to do a frame, so I used this shaker window frame, the stitched frame, to cut that out of some of the Journey cardstock that had that UV coating on it. You can't really see the design, but it adds a little bit of shine and it appears slightly darker than the cardstock. So now you can see what I was thinking. I love not having the white outline. I think it works really well. If you didn't have the same TriBlend marker and you don't have a color that's close, you could also do black, and I think that would work nice as well. I'm just going to glue this frame onto this top layer, and I thought it was a nice way to finish off that circle. This set has some really cute options for sentiments, but with the amount of space I have below here, I'm just going to do a simple hello from the set. I prepared my cardstock with my anti-static pouch. I'm using Versamark to stamp my hello, and then I'm going to white heat emboss it. I wasn't sure what else I wanted to do for a sentiment. I didn't really want to add an extra label or piece or anything. I wanted it to be part of the cardstock and keep it super simple. And a nice little hello card can be used for so many different things. So I thought this would work really well. I'm just going to heat it up, melt it, and then I added some foam tape on the back and I applied it to the front of my card. When I stuck on my little hedgehog, his body is down flat, and I put a couple of pop dots under the flower. So the flower kind of comes up over the edge and is raised, but the rest of him is down flat. Now I'm adding some gold glitter gems. It just felt like it needed a little something in that area. So I'm just adding a little sprinkle of gems, and then that is going to be it. There's so much contrast on this card between that deep blue and that bright yellow, and as well the little pops of white on his quills, and the sentiment, of course, the gorgeous gold on that foil. It really makes this card pop. For our next card, I'm using this adorable image with the two little hedgehogs together. You can see I added a little bit more texture in my coloring on their tummies, and I think both ways looks good. I do prefer the smoother look a little bit more. I'm starting off again with a 4¼ by 5½ inch white note card, as well as a piece the same size of white cardstock, and then just a leftover strip of that gold foil Journey paper. Now I have the Orange Peel Quilt Spellbinders 3D embossing folder. I love this folder. It is so gorgeous. This pattern is so dimensional, and it adds a lot to a card so easily. You don't have to do a lot. You basically run it through the folder and slap it on your card. I'm just using my ATG gun to adhere this because it seems like there's enough flat areas on this design that it can hold it no problem. Sometimes with 3D embossing folders, it's so dimensional that I end up using like liquid glue so I can really hit just the few points that are touching the card. I'm struggling here to line it up perfectly for some reason, but going in from the corner and just pressing it down, I can always trim off excess later. For the rest of my card, I want to keep it super simple. That texture in the background and then the foiled Journey paper I think is enough. And I'm just trying to see if I want to add a little bit more. This is the UV coated cardstock that has the design, so it's more subtle. But I decided, you know what? It's just not working. It just looks a little bit weird. So I'm going to stick with the one strip of paper and just put it right across the middle. I just want to use the placement of my little critters there to decide how far up to go. It's going to go like right smack dab in the middle, and I want to leave room underneath for a sentiment. With simple cards like this, you really want to make sure that everything is straight and correct, because if it's not, there's not a lot else going on to distract you from crooked paper. So I want to make sure that was straight before I cut off the excess. And then my little hedgehogs here, I am going to pop them up on foam dots just to give them a little bit of lift and dimension to my card. And then I need to find something for my sentiment to go on because I can't stamp on that embossed area. So I have this Sweet Memories card making workshop kit. There's these cute little shapes, like little label shapes. And there's a bunch of sentiments in that set that fit perfectly on those little labels. So I'm not using a sentiment from the stamp of the month, but I figured that would be fine. So I just cut the label out in white. I didn't want to have it contrasting. I wanted it to kind of blend in with the background. And then I'm stamping it with Journey ink. Now the Journey ink looks a little bit lighter than the cardstock, but I think it's fine. I decided to use a little bit of Barely Art glue to adhere my sentiment piece down, and I'm just going to hold that in place because of all the texture. You kind of have to hold it for a little bit longer. Let that set up, and then I am good to go. I debated adding some gems or something, but I just don't think it needs it. With that beautiful textured background and the dimension of our cute little hedgehogs, we got a lot going on this card. With this third card, I am using this adorable little image, and you can see the coloring is not quite as blended. I didn't notice while I was working on this card, but I did end up going over that with the E21 again, just to smooth it out a little bit. Now, a concept for this card is I wanted some angled pieces. I didn't have any measurements in mind. I was just kind of thinking, where am I going to put all my things? Make sure I have room for my sentiment. And I kind of want to have little bits of these two papers showing. So I decided, since it's important where my sentiment is going to end up, I want to stamp it first. This sentiment is actually from the Stamp of the Month set, and it fits perfectly beside this little hedgehog. So I tried it in Journey first. I didn't like it. It was too much Journey. I went and grabbed my Archival black, which is my go-to for sentiments because it is so black. And my thought is, because I'm not measuring the pieces I'm using up top, if I stamp the sentiment first, then I can work the rest of the card around it and make sure that I don't cover it up, rather than trying to preserve enough space for it and stamping it later. Now I hope you're ready for this, how technically I'm going to cut this. I'm putting a little snip in my paper where I want to cut it on my trimmer, because I do want to cut it on my trimmer so it's straight. But basically I just put little snips in, and then I'm just going to go from where that snip is all the way up. So I'm going to waste a little bit of paper, but it's not a ton. And then I'm going down from where my other little snip was to get this really weird shaped piece. So I'm going to use that in that corner. And then once I had that funky angle, I was like, ooh, do I want that over top? Do I want that funky little angle to show? That would look kind of cool. And so I debated over this for a little while, trying to see, okay, if it's cut off here, how's it going to look? So I decided to go ahead and cut this paper so I could kind of get a feeling for how it was looking. And I think I totally could have gone with it this way. I think it still would have looked good, but I decided I love the gold foil too much. I don't want to cover up any of that. So what I'm going to do is actually put that underneath just like I had planned, and then this guy over top where the two meet. I love the angles of this, and I think it's going to look really cool. Now, I'm not really sure why I was holding a pen in my hand. I think maybe I was planning to mark the card. But yeah, the pen was just hanging out in my hand. I was like, I'm not measuring. I'm not marking anything. We're just going to adhere everything on and see how it turns out. For this gold foil piece, I did decide not to trim it down ahead of time, but instead to just play with it and move it around until I was happy with it, and then stick it on and hand trim off with my scissors whatever was left. And I think this gave me a little bit more flexibility. I was not worried about trying to line up the bottom points. I figured we got kind of weird angles going on this card anyways. That's just the look we're going for. I didn't worry about them being at the same heights, because I'm going to have my little image on there anyways, and it kind of takes up that portion of the card, so it's not super obvious. I did use some pop dots, some little foam dots on him, and then I wanted to add some ground underneath of him so he didn't look like he was floating. But if I use alcohol markers, they're going to soak right through to the inside of my card. So I grabbed my colored pencils, and I'm using the gray out of here. It was kind of light. I probably should have gone to my Prismacolor pencils and grabbed a darker gray, but I really didn't feel like doing that because these were handy and right there. So I just kept coloring, made it dark, a little bit darker just by going over it and over it. And there you can see I have a nice little shadow underneath him so he doesn't look like he's floating, and there's nothing transferred to the inside of my card. Here are 3 cards all together. You can see how much they pop. That gorgeous journey color, the gold foil. I love the contrast between the yellow and the blue. I wanted to use something that was kind of across the color wheel so that we'd get a nice contrast between the colors, and then of course the gorgeous texture and dimension of the images as well. Just makes it look so bright and happy. If you're ready for another card video, you can click this playlist here, and I will see you very soon with another layout video using some new Stampin' Up! Products. Thanks for watching. See you next time.